At 7 o'clock, call the meeting to order, 7 p.m., Grafton Select Board meeting. Real quick, I got some preliminary things I need to cover first for this remote meeting. I'll read a couple things into the record. Pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, the Governor March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. The various boards and committees representing the town of Grafton will conduct their public meetings and hearings via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. Just to remind everyone that we are using a Zoom meeting and that if you are to share your screen, it will be available and recorded for the public. In addition, if everyone could please make sure they have their names appropriately named on their board, that means me. Here we go. In addition to that, if you would like to have access to the floor, please raise your hand. I will call you and allow you to have the floor to ask your question and participate in the conversation. In addition to that, let me see here. We will be. Let me see, do anything else here. Sorry, doing this a couple times now. Next, I will do a roll call, please, of the meeting. And when I call your name, please announce that you are here in the affirmative. Mr. Fazio.
Fazio present.
Mr. Often.
Often present.
Ms. Roy.
Roy here.
Mr. Frisbee.
Frisbee here.
And town staff present, Mr. Terenzini.
Present.
Thank you. Next up, just a couple of people that are scheduled to be here later. We won't call them until 8 o'clock, but we have.
I have public comment.
One second, I'm just going through the rest of the roll call here. 1 second, I'm sorry. Is Mr. Falk here, please?
Yes, I'm here, present.
Right, is Mr. Terry here? Nope. Okay. Ms. Turgeon?
Present.
Ms. Pearson?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. First up, I got a couple of announcements to make. Just to remind everyone that we made changes how participant questions will be handled during the select board meetings going forward. If a participant has a question pertaining to an agenda item, they may ask a question by using the raise hand function of the webinar. The participant will be called on by the chair and then temporarily brought in as a panelist to the host to ask their question. Following the Q&A, the resident will then be returned to participant status. The Q&A function for this meeting has been disabled. Please, as a reminder, the Municipal Center remains closed to the public. However, appointments can be made between 8:30 a.m. 12 p.m. Monday through Friday, calling the department directly for an appointment. Just a reminder, the Community Preservation Committee will be holding a public hearing to receive questions and comments on the draft Community Preservation Plan on Thursday, September 24th at 7 p.m. Please check the agenda for the Zoom meeting link at the town website at www.grafton-ma.gov. Just another reminder that town meeting is upon us and will be held on Monday, October 19th at 7:30 p.m. It is scheduled to be held at the high school gymnasium and commons area. More details on the meeting will be following. In addition, we've received several questions about Halloween and whether or not it will be held this year. While Halloween is not a town-sanctioned event, we recognize this year where residents may be looking for guidance around it. In speaking with the Board of Health, if the state issues guidance around Halloween, the town will follow that guidance. At this point, we ask people plan for a Halloween that follows all state mandated social distancing guidelines around sizes of groups, face coverings, and staying, please, with 6 feet apart. That's all the announcements I have, and we have a comment. Ms. Roy?
This is from Rachel Gertstein. I'm requesting that this letter be read at the Grafton Select Board meeting tonight. Dear members of the Town of Grafton Select Board, I am a resident and homeowner in Grafton. I am writing to express my concern about the process used by the town moderator to choose the at-large members of the screening committee for the town administrator search. It is my understanding that the choice has been made that 2 of the 3 members were on the previous search committee and are all male. It is disappointing to not see any women included in these choices, and I am also concerned as to whether these choices contribute to the goal of populating an impartial committee that has representatives with no vested interest in the selection of a new TA. My concern also stems from the way my application to the committee was handled. I applied to be considered for the committee on August 19th. Mr. Concon never replied to my email. I wrote again on September 3rd, and a town employee replied, but I never heard from Mr. Conca or anyone acting on his behalf. First, this is not the way to treat citizens looking to volunteer their time. Second, I would like to know by what criteria my application was not advanced to even a quick screening call. Third, as a citizen of Grafton, I would like to know who was chosen and what were the criteria for their choice. Also, I would like to encourage the select board to consider examining carefully the committee as configured due to the lack of transparency and adherence to the fair search practices, and also to examine the process used by Mr. Conca to determine whether it meets with your approval. I am wondering if this procedure, as stated in the town bylaw, was followed Article 32, Section 3. The select board shall, prior to the start of the search process, adopt a charge for the screening committee setting forth the particulars of the search process involving a time schedule, number of candidates to be selected as semifinalists to be interviewed by the select board, or any other directives the select board deemed appropriate. I would hope that among your directives, the moderator would be charged that the screening committee at large members be diverse, that the process for selection would be fair, transparent, and that the selection serves the interest of the whole town in an impartial manner. Sincerely, Rachel Gertstein.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. Okay, if it's okay with the committee's permission, I'd like to take a couple things out of order tonight. We have 2 members here for appointment for Disability Commission. We have Ms. Pearson and Ms. Turgeon to fulfill a seat that was vacated just a few weeks ago. So we've asked them to come in here tonight to potentially interview for this position. If it's okay with the committee, I can go ahead with that process. Okay. All right, thank you. So tonight, taken out of order here, Disability Commission for 2 candidates. We have first up, Ms. Turgeon. And if you want to just give a quick statement and interest, and if the board has any questions.
Sure, Peter, thank you. Thank you for hosting this. And I know most of you know me, but for the public that's viewing, my name is Terry Turgeon. I've lived in Grafton for 23 years. I have always been interested in advocating for those who have disabilities. I personally am very connected. My daughter is blind. My brother-in-law is wheelchair bound. So I fit those criteria of having a family member for whom has a disability. In my private life, I've worked both as a teacher as well as an administrator at a 766 school outside of Boston. I served 10 years on the Grafton School Committee. Anyone who knows me, Peter and I served together, knows that advocating on behalf of students with special needs was always a high priority for me. I see this as an opportunity to continue to participate in town government. I care very much about being civic minded. I am of the belief that to whom much is given, much is given, much is expected. And I really would be honored to serve in this role. And I spent quite a considerable time reading over the 153-page document, and I certainly would welcome any questions you might have for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turgeon. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Turgeon, or we want to let Ms. Pearson do her statement and we can ask both the candidates questions? How do you wish to proceed?
I like the idea of hearing from Ms. Pearson and then asking both candidates at the same time.
Okay, sounds great. Ms. Pearson, if you want to give an opening statement and interest.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for the invitation for being here. Initially, when I applied for this spot, I actually believe it was, I thought it was a previous spot that must have already been filled. But anyways, my name is Jennifer Pearson. I've lived in town for a few years. I'm a mom of 5. I'm recently diagnosed with a neurodevelopmental disorder that has gone undiagnosed and then misdiagnosed for most of my adult life. I do have 5 kids, and a few of my children also have disabilities, including autoimmune disorders and other additional neurodevelopmental disorders. So I've had about 11 years experience navigating the world of parenting when you have disabled children, and advocating for their medical needs, advocating for their educational needs, and just trying to meet their needs at home. I also previously have worked as a substance abuse counselor, outpatient and inpatient. I've done some casework to help provide some services to that community. And I had, in the past, I also did work at one of the day programs through Alternatives. So I've had some experience in working directly with people. And then to find out, like earlier this year, that part of the reason my life has had some of the significant struggles it's had is because I have gone undiagnosed. And so I'm a firm believer of things such as nothing about us without us. I was really excited to see that there are people, I believe, on the Disability Commission who have come out basically as having a disability themselves. And I think that's really great, important. This community has become really important to my family. The school system itself has done amazing things with especially my older kids in the few years we've been here. And more recently, and I think, you know, a lot of people have felt a real need to get more involved in their local communities, to understand how the local governing happens, and to put yourself out there. So I'm trying to put myself out there as a member of the community with a disability who would like to help advocate for others. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Pearson. All right. I'll open up the board. Has any questions for the candidates? Mr. Fazio.
Thank you. I just want to thank both Terry and Jennifer for putting yourself out there and you know, applying to fill these seats in this really important role in our community. I'm sitting here listening to both of you saying, wow. I mean, in my opinion, you know, this is exactly what we need. Candidates like you stepping up, volunteering their time to help in our community. And you both have, you know, bring a lot of value to this role. And I just wanted to say thank you first and foremost. I think a follow-up question for me would be, you know, like reading through or seeing what the Disabilities Commission has done so far. You know, we've kind of relaunched it in the past year, so it's still relatively new. Are there any specific goals that you have that you would like to see the committee or the commission take on, rather, that you want to add value to this Disabilities Commission? And that question is for both of you. And thanks again.
Ms. Pearson, you want to go first and then followed by Ms. Turgeon?
Thank you for the question. And if I may, I actually wanted to say, recently we've had some issues of housing come up. So I I spoke with Joanne earlier, but I wanted to make sure I made it clear. I was told that the rules were that I wouldn't have to immediately resign, which is why I felt it would be okay to come and be interviewed and allow the board to make its decision. But there is the possibility that at some point during this term up until 2021, we might actually have to leave town. I would obviously request that the superintendent allow my children to stay through the school year to not disrupt their education. So I would at least actively be engaged in the community, at least until the end of this 1-year term, less than a year term. But I did want to, you know, in the interest of full transparency, it's really hard to say what will happen housing wise. So I did want to get that out there. And in terms of what I think I could see the Disability Commission doing, I'd love to see their goals a bit more clear. things are written very broadly. And I think that's good in a way because it gives you a lot of room to go with direction. But in some ways, it can also be hampering because you almost don't know where to go. I think there are a lot of things that we can do as a commission in this community. For example, I know affordable housing has been a real challenge. And I know a lot of people have been actively trying to really work at getting some things done and moving forward, really making housing affordable. In order to help, say, like the Affordable Housing Trust, the disability community might want to reach out to them and see if there's anything that they can provide in terms of information, education, and resources that might help them when explaining to the community the necessity for some of this affordable housing so that they can work together. So if there's something that the Affordable Housing Trust can move forward with, I think that would be a great partnership, a natural partnership. I also have started reading through the ADA self-evaluation. And I did see a lot of, some obvious stuff like the mulch and the doors. But I did notice some mention of things like the website. And I want to say, like, I've been struggling a bit with the town website. I've been trying to, in some form or another, find a place that I might be able to connect and help volunteer for the town over the past, and this is maybe slightly embarrassing, about 8 months. And it's a challenge for a person who doesn't understand how local municipalities work to find information. And I know Grafton has a lot of fairly specific committees, and it's very difficult to figure out what they do, if they're still active, if it's something I would be qualified or interested in. And the website itself is fantastic in terms of text searching PDFs. But I think there's a long way you could go when you reach the point of redesign that would really be far more inclusive of both people with disabilities. And again, when you get inclusive and you include, everybody with challenges, it actually benefits everyone. So even just your regular 18-year-old is going to benefit from being able to find that information. And third, I have some ideas like, getting out information to the town, to people who struggle with finding this information. I don't go on Facebook because my family is on there. I mean, sorry if they watch this, but it's really hard for me to find information sometimes. And if I can't remember where I've previously seen it, I'm going to now spend an extraordinary amount of energy and effort trying to refine that information. And I don't know, part of wanting to be involved is to learn how municipalities work, to see what is even reasonable, what can we work towards. But in my ideal Grafton, maybe there would be some sort of mass messaging system, the way that the state has set up the mass texting system to let you know when the governor is having different press conferences, to send you links to new information about travel guidance. I don't know if these are affordable options, but even in terms of emergency management, there might be some people who are able to find out emergency information that happens here in town, much like the school will, send out messages about school closings. Maybe, there's a water break and you're just warning the citizens about it. So I think there's a lot that can be done. And I'm sorry to get a little verbose, but I do have a lot of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Ms. Turgeon?
Jennifer, thank you for all of those. Those were all really great ideas. And I hope that members of the Disability Commission are listening to you as you share those. As I read through the 154-page document on accessibility and the transition plan, I'm reminded that we have our work cut out for us. But if we do this right, what we do at the end of the day is provide a level of accessibility and inclusivity to members of our town for whom aren't able, like us, to avail ourselves of it so easily without any extra effort. I was reminded when I looked at the 154-page document that we don't necessarily abide by the Web 2.0 guidelines. My daughter uses a screen reader, for example. PDFs, although good, are an image and are not accessible to screen readers. There's no way to necessarily invert the colors for someone who's low vision. The font sizes are all different on the website. And in light of COVID-19, when I think we're already feeling incredibly isolated, all of us who have really good coping strategies, you can only imagine the level of isolation those who have disabilities. And so one of the things I wonder is, outside of the senior center, what types of outreach are we doing to ensure that people with disabilities feel supported? I think one of the things the Disability Commission can do, if they don't already have this kind of in their queue, and that is, how do they do outreach? How do they talk about what they're doing? When you unpack 152 pages of what is an incredibly comprehensive, clear report, and where do you go? Do you start with the low-hanging fruit? You know, how much of this can get through CIPC? Does CIPC give additional points as it's leveling items that are of high cost if it ends up being a disability-related capital improvement project? You know, is there a way, and I couldn't in my preparation for tonight's meeting, is there a Gantt chart or a place where ordinary residents, but particularly those who have disabilities, can go and see what the work that's been completed to date? You know, it's ironic to me that Americans with Disabilities is celebrating its 30th year anniversary. And we have a lot of work to do here in town to make this town completely inclusive and accessible. And I totally agree with you, Jennifer, 100%. When we use universal design, I'm struck by watching Jen Anderson talk about putting sort of a beach rug behind the back of what is Silver Lake, and how awestruck she was that not only was that good for wheelchair users to access a recreational facility in town, but it was good for all families. And so when we create with that in mind, and when we design with that in mind, we help not only just to check off the ADA boxes that we've done that, but we also do something that helps everyone. And I think lastly, you know, and I'm sure this is something that the Disability Commission is thinking about, and I don't know if there's an answer to this, but I wonder if why at the time of the completion of this report, or when the town tasked the Mass Office on Disabilities to complete it, why weren't the schools included? And what should we be doing on that front to ensure that the schools are also included? And a second step from this, and this would be, I'm not just talking about architectural access and how you get into a building, but part of the role of the Disability Commission is to advise and assist officials in ensuring compliance and looking at our policies in town. And so that too would be one of my initiatives, one of my goals.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? Mr. Often? No? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Well, I want to thank you, Ms. Pearson, Ms. Turgeon, for coming in. Those were, you offered some great explanations and some materials and things that for the commission to be looking at. So at this point, you know, does the board want to entertain a motion for appointment? If there's no further discussion. Mr. Prisby.
We nominate Jennifer Pearson for the position.
Do I have a second? Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Prisby.
So, look, Terry's done amazing work with people and children with disabilities in particular, and been an amazing advocate over the years. I'm sure she'll continue to do so. What I think what sort of put me over the top on this one was just a recognition of the need, I think, to bring some new people into this who haven't always had the chance to contribute as much as Terry has in her career. And I was struck by, you know, what Jennifer was talking about. I completely can relate. In fact, we were just talking about the website at one of our last meeting, at our goals meeting, and how difficult it was to navigate for people who, you know, in this group. We have an administrative professional here and 5 people who do this a lot. And I, you know, even though the years have gone on, I distinctly recall how difficult it was for me to first want to get involved and to first go to these meetings and to be hesitant to speak out because there's always somebody that knows so much more than you do. And then, you know, God forbid you have an opinion that's unpopular. But, you know, a willingness to to be new at this and to ask questions and to come to the select board with suggestions, I think should be rewarded with the opportunity to participate meaningfully. And, you know, I know Terry, I know Terry's not going anywhere. She'll be around, and, you know, I'm sure there will be another opportunity for her to contribute as she has in the past. So thank you both. That's all I have to say.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Mr. Alton.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank both of the candidates for, you know, gauging their interest in the role. This is fantastic. This is exactly what we want. We have, you know, two candidates with a lot of experience. Jennifer, I was really struck with your sort of renewed passion and your, you know, interest in the past 8 months and trying to find some way to volunteer and help and get involved. And I was sort of, you had me at that. So I think I have the information that I need. Thanks.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Mr. Fazio.
Yes, I just want to again reiterate, thank you both. And Terry, please don't go anywhere because I want you on this as well. So it's probably only a matter of time. So thank you both.
Any further discussion? I wanted to say, I want to thank you both for coming in tonight before we take the vote. I do want to acknowledge, you know, both of you had great responses this evening for the question that was asked. And I'm encouraged by hearing what both of you had to say. And I do think that, you know, I do acknowledge Ms. Turgeon's history with me, especially serving on the school committee for several years, and her ability to really look beyond just certain aspects of just education, but looking at the town as a policy. And you're right, the town needs to have really good fundamental policies in place that encourage, you know, the right way to go about addressing disabilities in our community. Ms. Pearson, you know, hearing you tonight in your interest as well, I'm encouraged to, you know, I think it's, you know, very brave for people to come out and say, hey, this is what I have for disability. And I just want to say, I wish you also all the best of luck in your health and going forward. I know that's a very hard thing to say, but I wanted to just from the, be empathetic to that as well. And I do look forward to you serving on this committee. I think after the vote tonight, but I know Ms. Turgeon, I know you won't go anywhere. And if we can find a way to get you on there, I think we should look at that. All right. I don't have any more discussion. I'll do a roll call vote at this point, please. Mr. Fazio.
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Prisby.
Yeah.
Mr. Often.
Often, aye.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. All right. I want to thank you both for coming in tonight. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you serve. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much for allowing me to take that out of order this evening. Let's get back to first part of the schedule. Just pull up my agenda here. So let's start with October town meeting warrant. Mr. Terenzini, do you want to open this up, please?
Yes, Brian, are you there still? I'm hoping. Perfect. So the warrant we can go through piecemeal if Paradigm's available, or if you want to jump back and forth. What I'd like to concentrate on is the memorandum that I sent to Mark Terry and Brian Falk. Mark Terry has been kind of handling the personnel issues in the beginning of this with the chair, and Brian Falk is more familiar with charter statute, the ways to approach that. As we work through this, you have two options. One is to adopt the strong chief statute itself. The first step is to remove the charter conflict by removing the appointment powers of the TA. This would be a fall town meeting warrant article. We've got a placeholder there in which the board would to see if the town will vote to amend section 8-5B of the town charter by deleting certain words and strike through. And you would just simply remove the town administrator's appointment authority over the board of fire engineers, fire chief, forest wardens and the like. Forest wardens all flow to the a fire chief once you go with a strong chief. The second is that you have step is to remove a conflict in your general bylaws. The appointment powers of the charter are duplicated in your general bylaws. They're in both places. So we need to remove it in the general bylaws in the same manner in which it's removed from the charter. Step two, I would say that actually, would then be to a town meeting warrant article, which would adopt a strong chief statute. The challenge there just is one of timing, because the selectmen would get the appointment authority under the statute, but you've got to clear those hurdles in the bylaw, which takes attorney general sign off, and in the charter, which takes attorney general sign off as well. The second option is to adopt a local bylaw, which mirrors exactly the strong chief statute. The only difference is that it is the town administrator that is the appointing authority. What this does is it maintains basically some line of command on the management side of house. So you would adopt this bylaw, and if you put the statute side by side, other than in the term of 3 years, which can be removed completely at your pleasure, the statute is exactly the same as this proposed bylaw. You still have to remove the charter conflict relative to the Board of Fire Engineers, forest wardens, and other firefighters, because that all flows to the chief once you have the strong chief bylaw. And again, you have this charter conflict, strike that, the general bylaw conflict that you need to remove. And of course, you could still have a bylaw, but have the select board be the appointing authority. There's some reasons as to using a bylaw as opposed to a statute, but we can talk with Brian about that. And as you saw in the draft warrant, there's an article to do something by special legislation. And again, Brian can address questions that you have related to amending the charter by special legislation versus the ballot. So at this point, I'd like to just ask Brian to speak to the charter issues, the order, and then address whatever questions you have, either to me or to Brian, that we can help you through. If that makes some sense, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's fine. Please.
Thank you, board members. Again, Brian Falk from Myrick O'Connell, Town's Labor Council. I'll be brief because Carter hit the nail on the head in terms of what the options are if we're going to go down the path of doing a charter amendment through Chapter 43B, Section 10, which is the homegrown charter amendment through town meeting vote and subsequent adoption at the ballot by the voters. These are your two options. There really isn't a legal difference between them. They both work. They're both legally effective. It's just a question as a policy matter of what the town wants to do in terms of setting forth who appoints whom and where the duties are set forth. Carter mentioned that if you look at doing option 2, where we would essentially have the strong chief department functions laid out in a bylaw, the one benefit of doing it there versus doing it in the charter is the simplicity of making amendments if need be. General bylaw, you can amend at town meeting. It needs review by the attorney general, but by and large, those bylaws go through without much issue. Gives you flexibility that you just need one vote to make tweaks or changes as things may come up. A charter amendment, as you're seeing, is a little bit more complicated. There's always going to be a town meeting vote, but there's always going to be another step to amend a charter, either a ballot question to the voters, or if you go with the option which is shown elsewhere in your warrant tonight, just going by special act route to have the legislature adopt the amendment on behalf of the town after a town meeting vote.
Okay. Was that Mr. Falk?
Yes, happy to answer questions. As I said, it's largely policy differences. There aren't really any legal issues here, but I'm happy to answer questions that you have.
Thank you. Ms. Roy?
So I just wanted to clarify, I thought the board voted unanimously a couple weeks ago to amend the charter so that we could adopt the strong chief statute. So I didn't realize that a second option was going to be presented again, because I thought we were all on the same page that we wanted to amend the charter to make way to adopt the statute.
Brian's concern when we talked it through was putting it in the charter poses some challenges. So by doing it by bylaw or by a simple adoption of the statute, you maintain more flexibility than by creating the strong chief within the statute. The bylaw would look basically the same, except for you would call it a charter provision.
So I think the flexibility in being able to change the bylaw is a major drawback for me personally. I don't want it to be having that flexibility to change or tweak when we find it to be necessary.
And so you can do it one of two ways. You can put it in the charter. The question still becomes the appointing authority. You get the strong chief, or you can do it by adopting the statute.
Any other questions? Ms. DeFazio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Brian. So it sounds like your recommendation would be to adopt, for the board to adopt a bylaw. And I'm just, I'm curious on a few things. One, I understand that the TA would keep the appointing authority to this. And how does that differ from the charter? And if we decide the charter amendment, and then as far as timeline as well, I'm just, I'd like to know what the difference is in the timeline between adopting a bylaw and adopting the 43B.
Sure. So both option 1 and option 2 amend the charter. So the timeline is the same. That timeline that's set forth in Exhibit B, you need to follow for both of them if you do the local charter amendment process. If you go by the special act process, you don't have to have the hearing in advance. You don't have to publish notice, and you only need a simple majority vote at town meeting to request the amendment of the legislature. You don't need a 2/3 vote, which you do under the 43B provision. And I suggested bringing up option 2 to give the board options in terms of having this flexibility if they chose to do it. As I said, either option is legally workable. There really isn't any difference between them other than one gives the town a bit more flexibility if they choose to have it. And as Ms. Roy pointed out, some may not want that flexibility. Some might want that baked into the statute and left alone, or in the charter with a more complicated amendment process. That's a policy judgment, certainly valid as well.
Any other questions? Mr. Fazio?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Roy. I'm curious of your thought process on not wanting to change the charter and not having flexibility there. I'm just trying to weigh the pros and cons, and I'd be interested in your viewpoint.
So I want to be able to say that we have adopted the actual statute, the 4842, because a lot of the stronger candidates out there are going to want to see that and have that written in their contract. And if we don't have that, they're just going to move on. They're not even going to look here. And I want to make sure we get the strongest candidate possible here in Grafton in this big transition we're about to go through. Having something similar is nice, but it's not the same. So I want what everybody's going to be looking for. I want to put that into place. And I'm just confused again why we're talking about this, because we did vote on this already. We unanimously voted to change our charter in preparation to adopt the strong chief statute. So it feels bizarre to me that we're discussing it again.
Ms. Roy, so that was my call to bring in Mr. Falk and Mr. Terenzini to outline, specifically the steps necessary to do this and what are the components in the structure to do what we voted to do for the warrant for the other meeting. I thought it warranted just additional questions as to, wait a minute, what did we just agree to the other week and what are the implications? Instead of having one-off conversations with experts like Mr. Falk and board members, it was my desire to have a board discussion about this with someone here who could answer these questions almost at the, someone who's outside of our organization who really doesn't have a stake in any of the game, and that would be Mr. Falk here in his opinion on town charter structure, bylaws, and what the adopting of the Mass General Law and those implications would be. So that's all this is. So is there any other questions? Mr. Often.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks. I appreciate actually having the option, although we voted for this last week, and I think we were pretty clear on what our direction was. It's interesting to me that we have the option of adopting the same language, but just putting it into a bylaw instead of the charter. Which does give us a little bit more flexibility. So I think it's interesting. I definitely appreciate the conversation. But I personally don't know. So as a general principle, I think it's an interesting idea for this particular statute. I don't see that we would necessarily want to be changing anything. And again, I'm in favor of just us having the bog standard approach that most of the towns around us have to signal to this, potential candidates that our town is in line with what other towns have done, and they will, and actually that it would be a more complex process to change the statute for that chief. So that's my thought on it. But I do appreciate the conversation on this. I think for other statutes, I would be interested in this type of flexibility. For this particular one, I don't. It's not something that I'm interested in.
Mr. Terenzini.
Excuse me. If the idea of the bylaw, because of its flexibility, is not attractive, you can put that in the charter. And then basically you have the strong chief, but instead of it being in the bylaw, you have it in the charter, which makes it that much more difficult to change. It simply then at that point becomes who appoints. I do strongly believe that maintaining the management lines that are in the charter, you would appreciate in the long run. So if that is a splitting of the line that you're at all open to, instead of doing it by a bylaw, you can do it in the charter.
Mr. Frisbee.
So it's interesting, right? I feel like we've come full circle here. The reason why we are having this discussion is because there was a sort of a yin and a yang about the different policy perspectives of having a town administrator oversee a strong chief or oversee a chief, right? Or having someone come in who would be a strong chief. And I do find myself somewhat torn on that. I don't have any sort of deeply rooted feeling that a select board ought to be the appointing authority. I was concerned about some of the things I heard and some of the stories or some of the comments that Mickey told when he was here about interference from the town administrator's office over decisions that really ought to be the purview of a good fire chief. And so we're torn, right? On the one hand, we want to bring in the best possible candidate for fire chief, and that person certainly would like to see something, if not the exact statute, then something approximate there too. We also are in the midst of a search for town administrator. And I wonder if moving the appointment authority from the town administrator to the select board for no other reason than it happens to conform with the statute might not be in our best interest on that search as well. if we can codify this in the charter, so be it. That's fine with me. If that's what the concern is, but it seems to me we can kill two birds with one stone by giving our strong chief 99% of what you would see in that statute, all while retaining our ability to bring in the best possible candidates that we can on the TA search as well, because that might be something they'd be interested in. And I don't feel strongly about the select board retaining the appointment authority role.
Any other questions, comments? Well, my comments are, I'm in favor, going back to your first point, Mr. Prisby, that, could that, detract, town administrators from, applying here? I know other communities that have adopted strong provision, and it's never stopped them from applying in those other communities. I do feel that, in my opinion, making charter changes and being very specific in the charter does make it more difficult to make potential changes, because in this case, the way that this is being presented today and what the board decided on the other week, and if you go back to that meeting, it says in preparation for, to impose the strong chief provision. But at this point, adopting a mass general law within the town charter to me seems, really not warranted, not the place to put it in. There's no other real place I don't think in that charter that actually calls out mass general law, except maybe in one place. But without that, I feel that looking at the strong chief provisions, again, if we adopt just the mass general law at town meeting, I have read that, and we can make some modifications to it as it goes on. I've known that, I think one of you had pointed that out at the other meeting, we can go forward if we adopt mass general law chapter 48, that the town can over time make changes to that. But if it's in the charter, all right, to make any changes, if you're calling out that mass general law, then you make it extremely difficult for the town to ever make those changes. Whereas if we just adopt it at town meeting, we could create bylaws to better define it going forward. And that's how I read the charter, because charter is really the constitution of the town. And what you're setting all of the conditions in mass general law chapter 48 to be just this, and that if you wanted to make any modifications to that, then one person can call you out and say, town, you have to go through a charter, you have to go through the charter process. So that means it's got to go to a town meeting, got to get the votes to approve it, then it's got to go to a ballot, and then you got to make those changes and revisions. So I do see some components in that in chapter 48, especially like the appointing authority piece of it, like being into the charter where the select board will appoint the fire chief, and that solidifies that. But then all of the other components that chapter 48 covers with the overall management and the oversight of the department, personally, I think we could still adopt the bylaw as is at town meeting without going and putting the exact language in the charter, and still get to, I think, what everyone's trying to do. And not so much as going around robin, but again, the implications of adding, and Mr. Falk, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were to adopt mass general law chapter 48 into the town charter, any component that we try to make to that mass general law that we want to make final revisions becomes a charter change process, not necessarily just a bylaw. Is that correct?
Well, if we include the language of the local option statute in our charter, then yes, that would, we'd have to do a charter change to make those changes. We just do option one. All we're doing is amending the charter and the bylaws to remove the conflict and adopting the strong chief statute. So we'd be operating the strong chief statute contingent upon the charter and bylaw changes taking effect. So it wouldn't really be amending the charter to include that. I think what Carter was referring to was in option two, if folks are concerned about having the language of the strong chief statute in a bylaw for flexibility and would prefer to see it in a charter, that's something else that we could do, is to have where you see step one under option 3 in the memo, essentially have that be a charter amendment where the language would be there. And that would bring about the scenario that you were just referring to, where if we wanted to make a change to that, we would have to amend the charter all over again. And that's the issue about flexibility. We wanted to make sure that the board had before it, so it had all the options before it moved forward. But option one is fairly straightforward. we're adopting the strong chief statute. We're just getting rid of the conflicts in the charter and the bylaw that would seem to negate that in terms of appointing authority and supervision of the department.
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments? Ms. Roy?
So just to clarify, this was purely informational, and we are sticking to the original vote from 2 weeks ago where we're going to remove the conflicts in preparation to adopt the Mass General statute.
Nothing's changed unless someone's going to make a motion tonight, Ms. Roy, but that's correct. Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. So, Mr. Terenzini, I guess we have, we addressed the concerns and just the process. So are you all set from us? You have the direction you need from us to draft the warrant language?
I do. I just would like to comment on Mr. Prisby's observation that there are strong chiefs across the Commonwealth and TAs apply for the job. This, however, will be a diminution of the authority of the TA, and that may cause some to have second thoughts. So I just wanted to touch upon that. But what I'm getting out of the conversation here tonight is that the board, we would put option 1 into the warrant with its 3 steps. The only thing that we would have to do is on step 2, I need to kind of work through with Mr. Falk the trigger that we could put on there, because technically you can't make that effective until the amendments to the charter have cleared the hurdle of the election. So we would probably say something like effective with the, I don't know, Brian, we'd have to say effective with the proposed amendments to the charter. I would hate to see it get separated into 2 town meetings, is my concern. That you amend the charter, then you get past the election, and then somebody says, oh, wait, let's remember, we still have to have this town meeting warrant article to adopt the statute.
I have a question for Mr. Falk. So let's say we put this option in here. Let's say this passes town meeting. Can step 2, adopt MGL, be contingent upon successful ratification at annual town election in May?
That's how we've got it drafted right now. If you look at step 2, which is the proposed fall town meeting warrant article, we have that language in there. It's a string on a local option, which isn't often done. I'm not aware that it's prohibited. I've not seen where it is prohibited. I believe that we could do it. But effectively, we would be adopting the strong chief statute. The charter amendments are for cleanup, to remove any inconsistency between the 2 and to clarify that the town administrator wouldn't be making this appointment anymore, to remove any ambiguity about that point. That's the purpose of the charter amendment. And again, if we amend the charter in this fashion, going to a ballot question in May, that's why we have to go through that process. If we went with the special act charter amendment process, we wouldn't have to do that. We would just be going to the legislature for approval of the charter amendment. In all likelihood, I can't predict or promise, but in all likelihood would happen much sooner than the spring election.
Mr. Falk, you're saying the special legislation process would happen before the spring town election?
I believe it would be quicker. I can't promise anything, but we know when the spring election would be. We've got how many months between now and the spring election, where if it passes at the fall town meeting, we may see a special act adopted, relatively quickly. Legislature is clearly busy and has a lot going on. But you have the option of it happening quicker, and you also have the removal of the 2/3 vote requirement at town meeting. It would just require a simple majority vote at town meeting to petition for a special act to amend the charter.
And that would still be accomplishing the same thing as option one.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Mr. Fazio.
So why wouldn't we choose that option? Because we don't want to make modifications? I guess I'm asking this to the rest of my board members. So, I asked the question about the timeline sooner. So it sounds like if we can accomplish the same thing sooner, why wouldn't we do that?
Anyone want to answer that or have a conversation? All right.
Looks like Carter has his hand up.
Well, I think the balancing act here is going the 43B route requires first 2/3 at the town meeting and then your ballot question. Going the special legislation right requires only a majority vote, and then it goes to the legislature. And kind of one of the reasons that previously we had dismissed special legislation was a concern that the legislature might be consumed with the economic issues, the operations of state government, given the economic impact of COVID and the unknown impact. So the board really needs to kind of, this is where you put your political hat on and kind of decide, what do you think the legislature is going to be concentrating on, and what kind of faith do you have in the local delegation versus the certainty of a date when the relatively certainty of knowing when the annual town election is going to be held. So you kind of have to weigh those two out, and we can go either direction that you wish, because effectively the only difference is you're using special legislation to remove the conflict as opposed to the statutory process. The adoption language for the strong chief remains the same. It's contingent upon we would just change contingent upon the amendment of the town charter to remove the authority of the town administrator, as said charter amendment is proposed in the preceding article. We just change that trigger, that contingency, to reflect how you are amending the charter.
Okay. Mr. Austin?
I guess I'm much more comforted by the idea that we would have a fixed known date that we'd be working towards. So, personally, I'd be in favor of going to town meeting and asking for a ballot vote. I think that's a better approach. I think we're going to have strong support for this within the town. And I like the idea of having a known time frame for all this to happen.
Ms. Roy?
Just to reiterate, Mr. Falk did call option one very straightforward. So I like the idea of just a straightforward, not complicated, not getting creative, just get to the end result.
Anybody else? All right. Mr. Fazio, sorry.
Yeah, I'm asking the questions, but I have to agree, just, staying with the option we already have in place makes sense to me because, there's been enough unknowns and having the town meeting dates already set and, the time to do a certain amount of outreach within the community to let them know what we're doing and doing it at a certain time to come to the ballot, I think is the right approach here.
Okay. All right.
A quick question for Mr. Falk, if I might. So step one is removing the charter conflict. Step 1A is removing the general by conflict. bylaw conflict. Step 3, if you will, is adoption of the statute with the triggering clause. Would you have me write those as 3 warrant articles, or should the 2 conflicts be combined in one, Brian?
I would defer to the moderator, town council, and your usual practices. My personal preference is to have multi-part articles if we're talking about the same topic. So if it's a zoning bylaw, I'd rather have all the different things as step A, B, C, and D, rather than having separate warrant articles. Because what if one passes and one fails? You've got a bit of a mess on your hand. So I think one article with this subject in mind, and we can draft it so that we're hitting all the things that we need to hit.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Falk, thank you for coming in this evening. Appreciate your insight in this. Mr. Turgeon, thank you for putting this together for us and answering some of the additional questions that some of the board members had. I appreciate it. All right.
All right, thank you very much. Good night, folks.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move back to under schedule 8 o'clock. We have Community Paradigm Associates. We have Mr. Bernard Lynch here, who's the principal for Community Paradigm Associates. Just to let the public know, Community Paradigm Associates will be working with the Town Administrator Search Committee in assisting with screening potential candidates for Grafton's Town Administrator Search. So I brought him, Bernie, in here tonight to introduce himself to the board, perhaps go over the process that is going to be outlined here over the next couple of months, and have just a question and answer session with regards to the search services. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Lynch.
Well, thank you. Glad to be with you here tonight. We have the members of the Community Paradigm team that are joining me. You see on your screen Sharon Flaherty and also John Petrin. And the 3 of us will be the ones that will be working with your screening committee and with you to find your next town administrator. So we're happy to be here and happy to be working with you. I think I sent out, I believe, to Peter the sort of a flow chart of the process, and we can walk through that a little bit. And then also some questions that we can take up tonight, or we can do some further discussions with the board members on what you'd like to see from your next town administrator. Peter, how would you like me to do this? Would you like me to sort of walk you through that? Do you want to put this up on the screen, or do you want me to do that?
Let me screen share, Bernie. I've got the monitor set up here. I can manage the room here. More importantly, they may want to shut the screen sharing off so we can see each other speak. So
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the first document here that you've got in our packet.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was thinking we do the flow chart first.
This one?
There we go. Yep, that one right there. So this is basically the what we have is the tonight is our introductory meeting. A little bit about the community paradigm, maybe before we get started on this, and you probably already saw this in our proposal, but we come to you with extensive experience in municipal government. John and I have served as town managers, town administrators for decades, all told, and we have a great network of people throughout the Commonwealth that we work with that to help find you your candidates, and then ultimately your successful candidate, the choice that you make for the town administrator position. So, that's just a little bit about us and our backgrounds. Sharon's background is in communications and marketing. Particularly, she's served about 25 years in journalism. So she comes with that newspaper experience that helps us, sort of promote the community and do all the necessary communications work associated with this project. Tonight is the first step. This is our preparation of recruitment, our introductory meeting to review the process, which we're doing right now, and have a consultation with you, the select board. We're going to be gathering information following this meeting about the town. We'll be working closely, I assume, with Carter to try to gather some of those documents about Grafton, and we want to get a full understanding of the issues facing the town, the form of government, the organization. We want to be able to talk to the department heads to get their sense of the issues that facing their particular departments. And all of that comes together really in a position profile or a recruitment brochure that I think we sent you some samples of. I think we probably sent you a Millbury, where we recently completed a search. And we use this process of developing this profile to help you, sort of step back and think about what are the issues facing the town now, and what are the characteristics of the next town administrator that you're looking for. Things have changed certainly since the last time you hired a town administrator, and you probably have different needs and different interests in what the strengths are that you're looking for. So we think the preparation of this and working together on this is very important. We then use this as a tool to go out and help you find candidates. We certainly are aware of candidates that are out there, and we beat the drum in terms of trying to build up as big a pool as we can for the town to consider. And so we use this position statement as a means of getting the word out and getting the people that understand what Grafton is all about. So we do that, but we don't actually put this out on the street until we bring it back to you and we make sure that you are in agreement with this. Now, I'm not sure whether you're looking for the screening committee to play a role in this this particular element, or whether, but generally it's the governing body that would be actually approving this, and then we actually go out and we hit the streets with it. We collect all the resumes. This first process, I should note, takes about 2 to 3 weeks. Then we go out and we do active recruitment, post the position, advertise the position for about 4 weeks. We get in all the resumes. We do an initial review of the resumes and try to segment them into certain categories of candidates, those that are highly qualified, those that are not qualified at all, and those that we generally see as somewhere in between. They may have some particular part of their background that makes them an attractive candidate for Grafton, but they may not meet all of the the characteristics that we lay out in the qualifications. But we bring those to the screening committee and say, these are some that you may have some interest in looking at. The screening committee sees all of the resumes. And we have a discussion with the screening committee about all of the candidates, and they ultimately choose the candidates that they want to interview. The probably 7 or 8 candidates that will be brought before the screening committee for an interview. We work with the screening committee on interview questions and how the candidates are going to be evaluated. That's the third phase here, the initial interviews. Those interviews take about an hour apiece, and it's generally done over in one day or two half days, and then the screening committee makes a decision on who the finalists are going to be. They select the finalists, and we then do the necessary reference and background reviews at that point. To make sure that all of the candidates have clear backgrounds, and we get information about them from their references and other information that we can gather, and then we refer that to you, the select board, so that you then have a group of probably 3 or 4 finalists that you can interview. And then we have some optional services here that we can, some communities like having some staff interaction with the finalists, some communities like to develop some type of meet and greet. All of this becomes much more difficult in the age of COVID, but those are some things we can talk about down the road. And then ultimately the select board makes their selection. You would move forward to do the negotiation and the approval of the contract. So that's the process in a nutshell. We think that the first part is certainly very important so that we know what Grafton is all about. And we make sure that we have a good sense of the type of candidates that you're looking for the town. So if you want to take that down, I'd be happy to take any questions regarding the process, or if you want to leave it up, whatever is easiest.
We all have copies of the packet, so we should be good to go.
Okay. Happy to answer any questions that people have. The whole process takes about 12 to 14 weeks, and then maybe a little bit long, maybe another week or so to negotiate out a contract. So you're talking probably 15 to 16 weeks total before you have your choice, and then it's usually a 30 to 60 day notice period that the successful candidate would have to give to their prior employer or their current employer.
All right, Mr. Fazio, and then Mr. Prisby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Lynch, thank you very much for explaining the process. I'm just curious how many candidates are typical in a town like Grafton for the initial review of resumes?
We usually get somewhere between 30 to 40 resumes generally. And we've actually seen that to be maintained even during the COVID period. Really only one community saw a real drop off, and there were some other circumstances there, but they went out really right before COVID hit, and then they closed during the COVID, during the initial back in March. COVID's still with us. So, but it's their period ended sometime in March, and there was so much uncertainty at the time. I think people have become a little bit more, it's a fact of life now that everyone's living with, and everyone's continuing on to do certain things. And so we've still seen people go out and apply for jobs at this point.
Great, thank you. Because 30 to 40 is a fruitful search, so that's great.
Yeah. I mean, the town of Holliston, which is just down the street from you, I think we had 42. I think in Millbury we had in the low 30s. So, yeah.
Mr. Prisby, and then Ms. Roy.
Thank you. Bernie, hi, thanks for coming. What exactly are you looking for in your information gathering process for Grafton? Because you guys have all been in this business a while. You can go through our budget book, and you can probably, a trained eye will get 99% of the 7,000 foot view pretty quickly. Right. You'll know when our levy capacity runs out. You'll know that we've had a couple overrides. You'll know what our service levels are, what the departments are, the employee numbers, who's working in the TA's office. But my guess is it's probably pretty typical for most places. So, what is it that you'll be looking for that you can bring to candidates that might be unique to Grafton?
Well, I think what we want to know is the type of, there, for instance, there's different perspectives on what communities are looking for from their town administrator. Are they more focused on having someone that can build in certain management systems that aren't necessarily there? That wouldn't necessarily show up in any documents that we'd have access to immediately. So we'd want to hear that from some of the department heads. We want to hear it from you as to whether that's the case. We'd want to know whether you're looking for someone who's particularly strong in, do you feel that your team's strong enough in municipal finance, or you're looking for someone that's more focused on economic development, or you feel that the finances are such that you need someone that's very strong in municipal finance? Are you looking for someone who's, perhaps more focused on collective bargaining strategies, or are you looking for someone who is looking at, sort of implementing new programs, social service type programs for your community? We can certainly gather some information that's out there on the types of capital projects that are in the pipeline, that are in discussion, and economic development projects. But it's always good to hear about those too from people, and what prioritization there is to those. It's always, we'll know, for instance, that a community might be looking at a new fire station and a new library, but you don't really know until you start talking to people that the library is the higher priority of the community. And, there might be on the shelf right now is both projects being equal, but the emphasis is in one way or the other, one choice or the other. So those are the type of, and we sent along the questions that that we generally ask select boards about their candidates or what they're looking for from the next town administrator.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Roy?
How do you handle resumes that might come directly to the search committee and not through you?
We ask that everything should come directly to us. If they're not, if they're sent on to the search committee and not, we've never had it happen. We've had resumes sent to a board of selectmen or select board or a council or an HR office, and those are forwarded on to us. Going to a screening committee, avoiding us completely. We've never had that happen. I would think that would be somewhat problematic. So we'd ask everything be sent on to us.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to go over, Mr. Litch?
Well, I think the only other thing I wasn't sure how much time you had planned to do this, or if you wanted to do this as a group, or if you wanted us to reach out and do some individual. But these questions for the Grafton Select Board in terms of what are the top issues? What do you see as the top issues facing the town? What are the highest priority skills you see in the next town administrator? The experiences you prefer. It's interesting. We had a community we're working with right now that in another part of the state. And it was an interesting discussion that we had with the select board in terms of, do they want someone with municipal experience or do they want someone outside of the municipal world? Someone that's a non-traditional candidate. There are no necessarily yes or no, but there's a sense of on the continuum where the emphasis should be. So the board in that community ultimately decided, well, we'll look at a non-traditional candidate, but we really want someone that knows municipal government because we think that that's their last particular administrator was relatively new to the municipal world. We've had other communities that they've taken the complete opposite. They've said, we need someone who's really not does not have that. So we're interested in the type of experience, what you're looking for the type of experiences, you want someone that's going to be, pretty much in town hall all the time, and you want someone that's out engaged in the community. Those are the questions sort of we have, but we can do that now. We can do that with some one-on-one conversations over the course of the next week or so.
I think that's a great question for the board. I don't know how the board feels if it wants to have a separate workshop with this, with Community Paradigm Associates, or did you want to just handle this one-on-one with them? What's your preference? Mr. Brisby?
I'd like to do it in the workshop. And I think it's important that the community see us do it. I think that's the reason. I think if we, we could spend an entire evening, I think, on these 9 questions that we've got here. I could probably sum up pretty quickly. I think there's a theme that runs through all of the answers to each of my 9 questions. But if we were to start that now, we'd be here all night. I think it deserves its own space.
Okay. All right. So we'll work to set something up on that, Peter.
It works good. Yep, I'll let you know when we can schedule that in over the next few weeks.
Okay. Right. And we'll start doing our homework in terms of reaching out. If with your approval, obviously, we'd like to reach out to the department. We have a questionnaire that we send out with just basic information about departments, their staffing, their equipment, their facilities. Just sort of get a sense of that from the departments that we can then use to craft the position statement. If that's all right, Carter, I'll work with you on distributing that. Okay, great.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Lynch before we go? Bernie, Sharon, and John, thank you very much for coming in this evening and meeting with
Okay.
us. We look
Thank
forward to working with you guys. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. So we have no resignations tonight, no appointments for town administrator. We have new business, 5A action regarding vote to sign P&S agreement for 93 North Street. Mr. Terenzini, did you have something?
Yes, I didn't know if the board was interested in taking a quick run through the draft warrant. In case you had any questions, our plan is to have the warrant for your action next Tuesday. At your pleasure, but we do have the draft as of today in there.
All right, yeah, thank you for that. My bad. I know we talked about that one component with Merrick O'Connell. Does anyone have any questions on the draft warrant as is today? Mr. Prisby?
So Carter, you weren't here for this in the spring, but there was an article, it was Article 18 of the contingent budget warrant that we passed. So we roll the clock back. We had passed a contingent budget and then we passed an override budget. The contingent budget obviously would have come into effect if the override failed. Article 18 of the contingent budget contained an amount, I believe, for, was it fire department equipment?
102,000.
Yes. Have we accounted for that in here?
So in Article 1, we need to adjust for added expenses in this office, Mr. Lynch's contract, my services, and then what we think a town administrator will cost you with 4 or 5 months remaining in the year. We also have been burning through some cash over in the accountant's office. So we have 263, and then we have some other small capital items and such that need to be funded in some manner. So we have $263,000 in new growth above and beyond your estimates. And we have 102,000. So I met with the fire chief tonight. We believe, and I've given him some numbers. So yes, the plan is to use the 263,000 in excess levy capacity in your new growth estimate, the 102,000 in that one contingent article, and possibly a few dollars from the fire department. The need to fund deficits in the FY 2020 budget, we would fund with the free cash that you've carried over under the special one-time rules relative to COVID appropriations. But that is our intent, is to use that 102 as part of this. I'm not sure, this would be for Ms. Roy. I know we talked about possibly trying to get together with the FinCom chair Thursday afternoon. I'm not sure if we got that locked in, but we will. I've been trying to stay in close contact with Mr. Haddad so we can make sure we're keeping the FinCom tuned in each step of the way.
Yep, we're gonna be there Thursday afternoon. I think it was either 2:15 or 2:30, but we'll be there.
Yep. So hopefully that's responsive to your question, Mr. Prisby.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions on the warrant? All right, Mr. Terenzini, you're all set with that? We can go on.
I believe I am. I'll get it cleaned up and we'll distribute it. This did go out to the finance committee so they can get a quick early look. I'll chat with them tomorrow night and we'll have a final for you for next Tuesday. Some of the data behind it, the actual motions will have to flow within a week or so after that. But I'm good. I have the direction I need, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, moving up to new business.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Mr. Hoffman.
just one last thing on that. So another thing that came out of the Springtown meeting is that we voted to take money from an account which was called the Super Park account and move it into capital stabilization. In order to give ourselves some flexibility in terms of capital spending this year, can we just confirm that that money was transferred over and we should consider using the capital stabilization to kind of bolster our capital spending versus free cash this year?
That was, I'm sorry, was that Super Park
Yes.
you said? Okay. We will confirm that that transfer occurred. We also are not appropriating any portion of the 800,000 towards capital raised in the override. My understanding is that that's going to defer out another year.
All right, any other questions on the warrant? All right, let's move on to new business, 5A. So we have tonight vote signed PNS agreement for 93 North Street. This is with regards to the Burt Engvall property. Mr. Terenzini, did you want to go over this a little bit with us?
I have to say that this precedes me a little bit. I did talk with the donors today. They're anxious to get this done. And I'm afraid I truthfully don't have a great history on this one other than the donation will be for conservation purposes. And I do know it's been something that y'all have been working on for a while now.
I guess just for the committee's concern, have you confirmed that legal counsel's reviewed this PNS?
That is my understanding.
Okay. Any questions or comments? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to sign the purchase and sales agreement for 93 North Street.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Prisby, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried 5-0. Thank you. Next up, we have, this is action here tonight to vote to extend outdoor licenses for restaurants. Mr. Terenzini, this was something that you wanted to put forth?
Yes, the ABCC passed an emergency regulation earlier this year, allowing premises to be expanded outdoors due to COVID. This town voted a essentially blanket approval for any establishment. That ends on November 1. The ABCC has subsequently prepared this regulation, which allows you to extend it as far as 60 days past the end of the state of emergency. So let's say, for instance, that on April 1 of 2021, the governor were to declare the state of emergency done. You could go as late as June 1 with local extensions. We have put this before you for your action and respectfully suggest that as a pro-business gesture and also to give people a little more time. Many people have actually enjoyed these expanded outdoor spaces in the nicer weather. We're suggesting that you go as far as 60 days past the declaration of the state of emergency having ceased, as the ABCC has allowed. Happy to answer any questions that I can, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions, Mr. Terenzini? Ms. Roy, then Mr. Often.
Did anyone just kind of check in with the chief of police to see how he felt about this and if he was on board?
We reached out to several of the department heads. We had no concerns expressed. Obviously, I believe we had in our motion that any requirements of the various departments would have to be honored: fire, building inspector, health, and the like.
Mr. Hoffman?
Ms. Roy asked my question, but I'm in support of this.
Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? Mr. Prisby?
Yeah, I think this is a sort of a general question that might go to this in the next one. How do we feel so far about enforcement of the rules and regulations by both the Board of Health and the Police Department concerning outdoor establishments? And, I'm more than in favor of, doing everything that we can to make sure that these businesses continue to operate. And I myself have greatly enjoyed grabbing some food outside, but there have been complaints about noise. There have been complaints about failure to abide by the governor's COVID regulations. Are we going to get this worked out such that all of Grafton's businesses who are abiding by the rules can move along and enjoy these looser restrictions, or is this going to be a problem with people who may or may not be interested in complying?
Compliance with regulation, COVID or not, is always a challenge, particularly for those that wish to march to their own drummer. We did have a specific set of circumstances with respect to one business that I believe we shared with you. We've had one meeting with the Worcester Health Alliance to discuss the hiccup, if you will. One of the advantages of being part of Worcester Health Alliance is to have that enforcement responsibility on them. I've gotten a written explanation. We're in the process of setting up a Zoom meeting to nail this down. That will all be codified into writing, and then I will circle back with the chief of police. I cannot promise you that enforcement will always be smooth. It's been challenging across the state. The police have authority to enforce it, and in one local community, area community, they even told the Board of Health that if they tried to enforce the mask provision, the chief of police said he would arrest them. We'll do everything that we can. We'll circulate that once we have done in the next couple of weeks. If you would like to await that memorandum that I think is probably another 2 weeks to get finished up after we meet with everybody, I certainly can understand you tabling this until such time as you can feel comfortable that we do have a better handle on uniform enforcement of the regulations.
Yeah, just to follow up on that. I get some. Can you guys hear the back loop on this? Okay, forget it. That's fine. Thank you, Carter.
Any other questions from the board? All right, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to extend the expiration date of the temporary expanded premise liquor license that were granted pursuant to Section 4 of COVID-19 Order Number 31 or 35. I don't know how to say that. 35 uppercase 1 from November 1, 2020 to 60 days after the end of the state of emergency, pending all restrictions and/or guidelines from the Board of Health, Fire Chief, Police Chief, and Building Inspector are met.
Second.
I have a motion made in second. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Terenzini, I just do have one question with regards to what the motion was right after the order number 35 with the footnote of 1. Just to make note, there is no footnote at the bottom of that page. In our packet.
Apologies. I'll have to circle back to the staff.
So we're just reading this as is, but just for the record, there is no footnote that's part of this motion.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on the motion? Mr. Often.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's important that we do get to the kind of equity issue with making sure that we have consistent policies to enforce the guidelines from the state level. I definitely have heard mixed opinions from businesses around the town in terms of how they perceive this enforcement is going. So I think that's something we need to get to, but I see that as a distinct issue from actually supporting all of our businesses that choose to go this route. So I'm definitely in support of it.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Frisbee?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, aye. Clear, motion carried. Next up, we have 5C, action to take tonight regarding license fees for all alcohol pouring licensing. Mr. Terenzini, do you want to give us some background on this?
Certainly, this is another that we believe is a fairness and pro-business gesture. The restaurants were effectively shut down for basically the second quarter calendar 2020. Some towns are considering, I don't know of any in the area that have actually taken formal action yet, adjusting their renewal fees by some amount. The ones that I've spoken with range from 25% to 50%, with the most common being 25%, under the theory that that's what they really lost, was sort of that second quarter. We've given you some estimates of what you would lose if you did this reduction. I will tell you that other towns are taking the point of view that, this things happen in the business world, and this is a risk of businesses, and this is the cost of doing business. The amount of monies that we would lose when viewed through the lens of total revenues are so minuscule that I truly believe we could afford to do something for these businesses. And I know that being pro-business is important to the community. You have an economic development coordinator. We talked about some of the things the other evening. So I put this before you for your consideration. We are just entering the annual renewal process. So if this is something you are interested in doing, it would be good if we could know tonight, or if you're going to table it next week, so that we can put the appropriate notification into the packages, telling them of the extension of the expanded outdoor premises, and telling them, if the board acts favorably upon this, what that is, so that we can get those pro-business advisories into the hands of the businesses.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Fazio?
Yeah, I'm in favor of this. I think, as Carter mentioned, that, economic development is a priority in this community, and, giving a pro-business gesture during the time of COVID, as much as I, hate to lose revenue, the amount of revenue is not a concern compared to losing some businesses in the community. So I would be in favor of the 25% reduction in renewal fees.
Any other discussion? Questions? All right, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize a reduction of 25% in the CY21 renewal fees. Is it fiscal year 21? Is that what it's supposed to be?
It's a calendar year. You operate on a fiscal year, but the licenses are all granted on a calendar year.
Okay. Renewal fees for on-premise alcohol pouring licenses.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Frisbee?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion carried 5-0. Thank you very much. So next up tonight, we have to appoint someone to the Central Mass Metropolitan Planning Organization, CMMPO. Whoever is appointed to this tonight, there is a Zoom meeting tomorrow night at 5 p.m. So is there any members of the board who would like to be appointed to CMMPO? Seeing lots of enthusiasm, none. Okay. Is there someone who we feel that we want to appoint on our behalf for the town of Grafton?
I have CIPC tomorrow, so I would prefer it not to be me, if I can say that.
Mr. Often?
Does it have to be a select board member? I'm thinking maybe could we ask somebody from planning board? I have plans for tomorrow night, so I can't do it.
Mr. Fazio?
I just want to clarify something. So it sounds like from what I read that this is a meeting scheduled for tomorrow night for select board members or selectmen in the area to pick a regional representative. And so the commitment is tomorrow evening. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then currently the regional representative is Jesse Lemanik from Sutton, and we would choose as a region who the next representative would be. If that is the case, I would be happy to attend the meeting tomorrow evening at 5 p.m.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Can you clarify? I'm sorry, Ms. Roy. Can you clarify that is the way everybody else read it and is understood? Because I don't think I can take on the long-term commitment, but I can take on the commitment for tomorrow.
The motion's going to say just tomorrow.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
I move the board vote to send Doreen DeFazio to the CMMO or CMMPO information and members selection meeting on September 23rd, 2020.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Thank you, Doreen, for doing this. All those by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Thank you very much. Okay. Next up, we have here, do we have any select board member reports? Anyone from the select board want to give a report? Mr. Frisbee?
All right, so I have a few things. The Town Administrator Search Committee has finally been formed and announced. That's going to be meeting on September 28th, which is Monday. The Affordable Housing Trust met last week. We got an update on rental assistance. The MCO has begun their lottery. There were, I think, a total of 17 total applicants in the applicant pool. I might have, it was in the teens someplace. But it was good to see, making a positive impact with that right away. We're moving forward with our plans on 25 Worcester Street, but we are waiting for confirmation that the 25 Worcester Street deed has been recorded. I think everybody had signed that, but if we can just get confirmation that that deed is on record and transferred to the trust, then we can get our RFPs out. The Grafton Sustainability Commission benchmarking report is done. And I am working with Barry Smith to get a PowerPoint presentation going so we can present something to the board. And I will contact you, Carter, to see if we can find some space on the website to get that up on the town website. So, and one other thing, Barb Connolly from the Council of Aging contacted me concerning a contract for SNAP benefits with UMass Medical. She was looking for someone to review it. I think, Carter, either you or Ginny Creamer would be appropriate. It's a fairly long contract, but it seems pretty boilerplate to me, and would be, I don't think there's any downside to it, but I'll forward you the email on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, normally what I would do would be to burn through it real quickly and see if I had any items of note, so that when I transmitted it to council, I could draw their attention to those specific things that I'd seen, in addition to anything that they might have concerns over.
Okay, thank you.
Any other select board member reports? I just have a couple. So, Mr. Prisby confirmed the fact that the first meeting of the TA search committee will be on Monday, the 28th, at 7 p.m. I'm going to basically form the committee at that point, get them organized and back off and back away just to get them on their first meeting, and do that. In addition, I just wanted to also report to the Grafton that we did hold our goals meeting last week on September 16th at the Lions Pavilion at the Lions Club off of Brigham Hill Road. I just want to extend on behalf of the board my sincerest gratitude and thanks to the Grafton Lions Club, especially Don Clark, who assisted in opening the place up for us and making sure that we had COVID-safe seating throughout an outdoor event that was under the pavilion. I want to say it was an enjoyable evening to be able to meet the board members in person for a change, and that was a nice change. But it was a great meeting, and I just want to again thank the board. I want to thank Mr. Terenzini for facilitating, Mr. Fazio for help facilitating logistics, and again, the Grafton Lions Club for a wonderful evening. That's all I have. Mr. Terenzini, do you have any TA
I
reports?
do have a few things that I'd like to touch upon. With respect to CIPC, Ms. Roy and I met earlier today, shared, I think, agreement on a process going forward that more actively involves the CIPC, but will respect the role of the town administrator. We shared some forms we've used elsewhere. She shared the form that she was thinking might work best for this community. I've sent her some brief comments on that, and I promised her by noon tomorrow that I would have sort of kind of a process flow so that she could have that for tomorrow evening. Mr. McGoldrick will be lead staff in terms of getting all that disseminated and collected and supporting the CIPC. We got the policy books all scanned, had to break it into a couple chunks. You'll note it starts with number 82. Please don't ask me why, I honestly don't know. But you have all of those, and I think that as you get a chance to look through those, some perhaps should be incorporated into larger policies, but that's out there. We promised you last week that we would get that done by tonight. We got it under the wire, but we did keep that promise. Audit election, town clerk has been out for a few days. I'll try and catch up with her Thursday morning, and it's been challenging getting response from council, but we'll keep chasing that. I did meet with the fire chief today. He and I are going to meet next week with the preferred inspector candidate, see if a second conversation, we can't lure him in. I'll follow up CCU on the memo that I'll share with the chief tomorrow. Accountant, I've collected a couple of finance director job descriptions, and as I described to you last week, and I'll try to get this done in the next few days if I can. I think we need to look at possibly expanding that title a little bit, expanding the role a little bit, more finance team leader. You might not be ready for finance director yet, but I think if we can put a few more dollars at it and make the job look a little more attractive, we could think about going back out. At the same time, I'd like to explore with the surrounding towns, perhaps if we staffed it a little bit differently, they could support us 1 or 2 days a week with their town accountant, which would give them a nice revenue stream and let us do something. So we'll have that memo for you in the next week. I honestly don't think I can have it for Tuesday night, and I don't want to proceed too far without having a better conversation with you. So other than that, we'll try to keep you informed as best we can. Happy to answer questions at any time. But I'm going to, Peter, that Google shared spreadsheet that you did on the items of attention. I'll try to populate that a little bit more tomorrow. And we can maybe see that grow and see if that will work for the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any questions on Carter's updates? Ms. Roy?
So you said for the election audit, you were waiting to hear from council. Which council? Our council, KP Law?
KP Law.
Any other questions?
At some point, we can talk about this in a week or so, but at some point, they either need to get in here or you need to think about possibly doing something different. This has gone on for a while.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Do we have any correspondence this evening, Ms. Roy?
Yes. The Grafton Police Department will be joining a North American rail safety operation aimed at reducing preventable deaths and injuries on rail lines. They will be participating in Rail Safety Week, which is September 21st through the 27th. The goal of Rail Safety Week is to raise awareness of the importance of safe behavior near tracks and trains.
All right, thank you. Next up on our agenda, we have some discussion regarding our fourth quarter meeting schedule. Here are the dates proposed. Just wanted to go through this with everyone to see if these dates work and if everyone's on board with that.
Would the which date would be the workshop for Paradigm?
The first one we could possibly do it in would have to be, by this schedule would be November. We have a lot of things going on in October with public hearings and so on and so forth. We could use another meeting date besides Tuesday if that works for the committee, if you want to have it in October. And I'm probably thinking that would make the most sense before the search goes out. So I don't know how the rest of the committee would feel if we were to hold a workshop outside of a Tuesday.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Mr.
we got to do it. We can't wait till November on this. I mean, I know that, boy, we've got competing needs. We were just talking about not meeting as much, but it's so busy. I'd be up for any time because this is a priority.
I just realized we have the 20th available. 19th is town meeting. So, I mean, if that works for everyone, that would be a Tuesday, October 20th for a workshop. Does that work for everyone? I got 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up. I'm getting a no. Oh, okay, 4. All right, 5. There we go. All right, so I'll have Joanne make that adjustment and add a meeting for October 20th for workshop to work with Community Paradigm.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Fazio.
I just want to mention too, I think if we can even do it sooner, I would be open to doing it on a different day besides a Tuesday if other board members were open to that. I think, we started this conversation tonight and I think we need to propel forward as soon as possible.
I would agree with you. I just thought, when I looked at the 20th, that looked at the first Tuesday. So if that would be the latest we would go, could the soonest be Thursday, October 1st for this workshop?
Yeah, that's fine.
I could do that.
Okay, I think all 5 of us. Okay, then instead of the 20th of October, then we'll do this on Thursday, October 1st. So that's about 8-9 days from here. Okay. Okay. Any other questions or concerns on the schedule? Okay, next up. I'm sorry, Mr. Fazio. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
So we do not have a meeting scheduled next week, correct? And then Carter brought up the warrant being presented next week, but I do not have next week as a meeting week.
That's my oversight. I thought that you were meeting virtually every Tuesday night with a select board meeting, with a town meeting on the 19th. I would respectfully request, if nothing else, a one-item meeting for you to approve the warrant. So I could proceed to get signatures and get it out to the finance committee and the constables.
Can anybody meet the 29th for that?
Yep.
Okay, yes. Mr. Fazio? Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I will do my best to be there for one meeting. And, you know, unfortunately, I try to schedule everything else around the 1 week a month we may not have meetings, and I'm presenting to the select board in Sutton next Tuesday evening. So I can maybe try to be later on the agenda, and so I can be present to vote on the warrant. I will do my best.
We're just voting to sign the warrant. That's all we're doing.
That's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, unless you have other items of import. And my apologies, I thought we were pretty much on a, in my limited experience with you to date,
We are on a weekly schedule.
Yeah,
That's
we're
true.
not deviating from anything other than the norm. So, all right. So I'm going to set a meeting. Mr. Fazio, is there a time that works better for you on the 29th if we have just the one agenda?
I mean, if the board was open to doing 6:45 that evening, that if we could do it before 7 p.m., I would likely be able to attend.
Why don't we shoot for 6 p.m.?
Even better.
Does that work for the board? I know, Mr. Prisby, you've got a schedule too, so I just want to make sure I'm cognizant of that. Mr. Roy, that's good. All right, great.
Fantastic. I'll
All
be
right.
there. Thank you.
thank you for your understanding.
Yep, I understood. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Any other questions on the meeting schedule? All right, we have one set of minutes tonight for September 15th.
I move the board vote to approve the September 15th, 2020 meeting minutes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Roy?
So I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I noticed. In the TA report, it's super vague. And it mentions that he reviewed a lot of items, but I would like just an idea of what those items were. I know a lot of times when I'm doing research, I look at minutes to try to find something, and then it will prompt me whether or not to go back and watch the meeting. If the minutes are too vague, it's difficult to do that, and you forget 2-3 years down the line, and I don't know. But that was something I noticed, and I was hoping we could change for future minutes.
Okay, duly noted. Any other discussion? All right, yes, Mr. Fazio.
Who's taking minutes now? I think it was Becca before. So is it the clerk?
These meeting minutes are done, I believe, by Joanne.
Okay. Okay, but there's not notes taken during the meeting?
Everything's being done on playback, so they just go back and.
Understood. Okay.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Yeah.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, aye. The motion carried 5-0. Thank you. And Colleen, we'll make note of that going forward in future meeting minutes. Thank you. All right, last up, just on number 10, just left this here from last time. Ongoing tasks, review and informational purposes. I know Mr. Terenzini covered a couple things, but I didn't know, again, this is just being built off of what was required last time. Any questions or comments, I guess, going forward on this? Ms. Roy?
I would like to start seeing us tick some stuff off. So Grafton Strong marketing, is that something that we feel has been adequately done and we can now remove that, or do we want to tackle that?
Any discussion from the board? Mr. Fazio?
Yeah, I just want some clarification of this list. I guess I want to take a step back here. So, you know, I was in support of having kind of a checklist for us, but I guess I'm confused on what items are on there and what are left off, because it seems like some of these items are not necessarily the responsibility of the board, but the responsibility of staff. And so are we looking for updates, or are these action items that the board is supposed to be taking? So like for this one in particular, do we have an action item, or is this something for staff to be working on? Because I want to just make sure we're clear at the purpose of this list.
So I picked this one specifically because it made the list. We talked about it at a meeting one day. We just touched on it and said, we'll put this on a future agenda item. And then we never did. So I don't know if we gave any staff direction for this. I don't know if there's any money in the account anymore to have any action be done on it. So I think that's where I'm at. It just seemed like an easy one to tackle and get the list a little shorter.
So do we take action on something like this, asking for what's in the account? And, you know, is there an expiration date on the policy that we wrote, and how do we move forward? Is that kind of the thought process?
I don't think we can take action on any of these. I think this is just to review and informational purposes. So maybe on the next agenda where we can have that on there for a little bit more of a actionable item.
Mr. Terzi?
I think that it would help me personally on some of these if I understood the end game. So for instance, select board policies. If I was to just to get those delivered, that's done, and that could come off the list. If the idea is review select board policies, so now we've delivered them, then we would, in a workshop, let's say the October workshop, take that list of policies plus some others and say, okay, shall we take 3 of these and make them our priority? Shall we take the debt policy and make sure it's in the financial management policy? So it would be helpful for me if I understood the origination of these and what the end game is, and that would help us better say, okay, that's done. Or here's the next step that we need to do.
So I think for me, Carter, God damn it with this.
I think Peter needs to be muted. When he muted himself, the feedback stopped.
Ed, I muted you by accident. That was my omission. I meant to mute myself. So I just want you to know that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think this conversation is sort of the point. So now that we put select board policies on here and we've had a conversation a couple of times, I have, for the first time in my 2 years of being on this board, seen actual policies that we're supposed to be abiding by, which is news to me, but it's great. So now I can go through these and make a recommendation that we have a workshop on the 20th. Similarly with the election audit, you know, that would slide off our radar screen, and in fact did for about 6 weeks. And now we're making progress on that, I hope. Local tax relief committee, you know, I will request that at our next regularly scheduled meeting, we have staff in on that. And I promise to circle back with Peter on that. You know, all these are good ticklers to remember that while it's nice to discuss things in a discrete meeting and then move on to the next meeting, there are still things that aren't necessarily pressing, but we do need to remind ourselves that there is an end date involved with select board policies. Like, we do need to discuss this. And it's been my experience in the past that if we don't have something like this, that we'll never talk about it, as evidenced by the fact that, again, I'm the veteran member of this board and I've never seen these policies before. So, you know, that's helpful to me.
All right. Mr. Fazio.
I just want to make mention that these policies have been available in the town administrator's office since the day I started. So I'm confused by this conversation, but that's fine.
I mean, Doreen, there's a lot of things in the town administrator's office. I don't hang out there because I do this all day. And so unless someone tells me there's a book of policies here for you, I wouldn't know that. So I appreciate this list, and I appreciate the open communication that I've gotten so far since Mr. Terenzini's come on board, where now I know that there are policies that we're supposed to abide by.
I just wanted to add to what you said, Doreen, because when I joined the board, first meeting specifically asked for these, and Mr. McInerney made no mention of the availability of them in the office. He said he would send it out, and we're just getting them now.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to go back and forth on this on, you know, who knows what is in the office or who has time to go into the office or what was said. I just know, so we're talking about two separate things. One is the select board policies are available in, just for clarification, they have always been available in the town administrator's office. And what I have found helpful is I always just call and I ask. And if I can't get in and get something available, I typically have Cindy or Joanne look at it for me, find out, and then inform the board or let me know. So I'm just concerned of this list being too staff heavy without an end game to us. And that's what I want to try to avoid. You know, if there's action items available, I think that's great. But if there are things that are just going to sit on this list to make, you know, the limited staff that we have right now feel like there's pressure for things to get done without direction from us, I just want us to keep that in mind. And so that's all I'm trying to communicate.
So I want to just go in here and just say that the action item there was to get that list out. So that's done. So as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Terenzini, A comes off the list. That's done. To Mr. Prisby's next agenda item on the 20th for the workshop, I would suggest that we, you know, put forth, you know, what is it and what policies you want to review, and then, you know, what action items do you want the board to consider, and we can put that into either discussion or you know, into the scheduled part of the agenda going forward.
The action item on that is to vote on the charge. And we discussed this months ago, that we wanted to have the staff members who were involved in the charge come in and discuss this with them before we foisted the responsibility on them. We don't have to do that.
On select board policies. All I'm saying is that all we were looking for was a
the
list
local
of that.
tax relief committee.
Oh, no, I was going back to just, I tried to get a word in, but everyone was kind of going back and forth. So Mr. Prisby, bear with me here for one moment. I'm going on A. I think we've done that one. So I'm going to take that off. But yes, D will bring to the next committee. You'll work with me on getting the staff for the next available meeting. You know, library, TRICOM, I still have to schedule that with finance and schools. I know we talked about it last week. That's on my to-do list. Mr. Terenzini gave an update on the town accountant position already during his TA report. Fire chief transition plan, fire inspector transition plan. I think that's a work in progress. We discussed that during the warrant tonight. And then going down, fire inspector position. Any update on that, Mr. Terenzini? Is
the chief and I will be meeting with the candidates next week, see if we can't lure him in. And I will share with the board in the next day or so a memorandum, an email that I'll be sharing with the chief on some tasks that we need to do to move all this forward, break this log jam and get this moved forward. That gives consideration to his ideas and frankly clarifies a few conflicts that are in some of the reports.
okay. Adams Road, I know that's been under construction now. I know that a lot of that was wrapped up just recently. Is there any reason to keep that on this list? All right. Do we want to bring in the fourth leaf permitting update? If we bring in an update as to that, is there anything that we feel that the board wants to take action on in a future meeting?
I would love to hear an update on how that's going, how staff is handling the update, if it's transitioning well or if it's causing conflict.
Okay. I'll work on bringing that into a future agenda item. DP building project, we're meeting this Thursday, so I'll have an update for you on that after this Thursday. MCO rental relief. I don't think we have any new developments on that unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, that's in progress. So that could probably come off.
Okay, thank you. Creation of a charge for land database. I was talking with Joanne about that today. That will be on our next agenda item for future meeting. Upton Street RFP. I don't think we've got the staff to really go forward with this right now, but that's my opinion. But I didn't know if we wanted to keep this on the list until after we get more staff in. Mr. Terenzini?
I've reviewed the 27 Upton. Is that what we're talking about? 27 Upton?
Yes.
Yeah. We've reviewed that, and I'll circle back with John Allen at Thursday's staff meeting.
All right. Okay, FAQ for TA Search Committee website. We've got the TA Search Committee built. I think they should go on to their, be part of their decision at this point, unless the board disagrees. I don't know how you guys feel about that. I don't know if that's something that we really need to be working on. Okay, take that off. And that the TA Search Committee, that's been formed and that's starting next Monday. So do you guys feel that that's adequate that we can take off as well?
Yeah, that can probably be rolled into select board member reports.
Yep, I would agree with that. Okay. Okay, great. All right, I got a lot of work to do on that part there. We'll whittle this down for the next meeting. Mr. Terenzini will work on just updating that spreadsheet, just tracking everything and what the statuses are and what's going on there. Does anyone else have any questions on that, Mr. Terenzini?
I'll share with you the third version of the status that I sent you, because what we do is we leave all the items on. We simply hide the rows where we're done. So the worksheet always has everything on it. We just hide the columns and hide the rows that we're not using. So I'll get that out to you tomorrow, Peter.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Often?
Yeah, just to the commentary earlier about a policy review and a workshop. We had a second meeting with regards to our goal setting, right? Personally, I would like to finish that. So I would like to suggest that maybe we take the next opportunity for a workshop and try to move the ball in that so that we can help create some focus, if that's possible.
So I just want to try to circle back, if I might, quickly, Mr. Chairman, because what we do is we take all that list, then we send it out to the department heads to determine how much time they might need to do an item, if they need money, and in what year they can do it. Then we bring that back to you for you to adjust and finalize. If you would like us to follow a different process, we can do that. But I would urge you to consider having staff insight into in which year they can do which of those items before you take final action.
Mr.
Mr. Terenzini, can you remind us of the time frame on that?
Sorry, what?
Can you remind us of the time frame on that, when you think you'll hear back from staff?
Yes, I will have it out within the next week, and I would expect it back in 2 weeks. When is your workshop scheduled in October, Mr. Chairman?
So we are slated to have an additional meeting scheduled for the 20th, which is the day after town meeting.
If that's going to be your workshop for October, yes, we could be ready by then.
Okay. Any other questions?
And that's a workshop, not a business meeting, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it'll be just a single agenda item. Yep. Mr. Fazio?
If possible, could we get an updated schedule? I'm sure Joanne will be on this already, but it would be helpful just to make sure I'm kind of jotting things down on my calendar, but just confirmation of when we're doing what in the next month to 6 weeks would be really helpful to me.
Great. Yep, we'll do that. Okay. Any other questions, concerns? All right. I don't have anything else in that week's end of agenda, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion made seconded. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often,
Often I.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening.